one of our last lessons of the Zero to Hero, the Rise of Agents program, and we truly saved some of the best content for last. I mean, MCP is one of my favorite things nowadays. So I'm excited for this lesson. But before I pass the baton, I want to let folks know that we have today's lesson with Daniel, and then next week we're gonna have Danish extending a bit further on the theme of MCP and also fusion teams in this new agentic era. But what I want to do is starting today, I'm gonna make a link available to the people who are following the program through the WhatsApp channel for you to give us questions, maybe testimonies of what you like about this program. You can be very specific about topics and speakers. This is how we encourage speakers to come back and present more. So if you have good things to say about our speakers, please do. And submit questions as well. What we're gonna do is we're gonna unveil those questions and testimonies and kudos and all that stuff live when we record the very last lesson during MVP Summit. And we are recording that one right from Microsoft Studios in Redmond. So this is going to be an awesome experience. I'm gonna make this link available. You'll be able to send questions, comments. Don't send complaints. Complaints, you can send it to me. I'm sure you have complaints about the organizer of the program, not the speakers. Our speakers are awesome, all right? Okay, Daniel, I stole too many minutes already of your precious time, so I'm gonna pass the baton. Thank you so much for presenting here today. It's always a joy and delight to have you in this space, all right? Thank you.
Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Victor. And yeah, it's good to see you all. I always love these programs where you are getting a lot of knowledge in a short amount of time. It's really cool to see everybody in the community also share their knowledge and then also train the new people there in the community, because I personally love it to see new people in the community, because it's just more interesting to me. Because if we always look at the same people that are on stage, I think it's not really a good thing to have. So yeah, with that, I would love to see you maybe one day on the stage as well on this program. That would be really cool to see. But first, let me introduce myself. I have a beautiful picture here, thanks to Victor. So yeah, my name is Daniel Laskewitz. I'm a principal cloud advocate at Microsoft. And what I do is I create a lot of training material. I present at a lot of events on the Power Platform and Copilot Studio. And one of the topics that I've been diving into for the last year is MCP, or Model Context Protocol. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. Other than that, we also work really hard with our team, and April is my manager. So April is the manager of the team. I'm in the team, Scott Duro is in the team, and Eliza Benitez is in the team. And we all work really hard on, for instance, Agent Academy, where we create a lot of content for Copilot Studio. I'll show a couple of things also during this session about demos that are part of Agent Academy since I think it's a week now. I posted about it on LinkedIn yesterday. But I'm going to show a couple of those missions that we have there as well. And at the end, I will also share the link so that you can try it out yourself later. So with that, let's start and dive into what is MCP. MCP is a protocol, a standard, that is around for now over a year. And it's really cool to have it because it can let language models interact with tools, data and apps. And it's like a translator between your model and everything else. So what you can do is you can, for instance, in your agents, you can add an MCP server and you can give it a whole bunch of different tools that are in your agent. The cool part about it is that you can add one MCP server at once, and then you can have a whole bunch of tools already available. As you might have seen already with Copilot Studio, for instance, you can already do a whole bunch of things with tools, with connectors, for instance. And for connectors, you have connector actions, which are, for instance, if you look at Outlook, you have an action where you can list all the emails, you can send emails. Those are all different tools. So you have to add one tool for listing the emails, you have to add one tool for sending an email, and that is a lot of work, basically. And with MCP, you are able to add an MCP server for Outlook and all the different tools that are for Outlook available. You can already use those at once. You only have to use, or you have to add an MCP server once. You don't have to add all those separate tools. And it saves you a lot of time when you're building those agents. And I think that's a really powerful thing behind it. Another powerful thing is that it can go back and forth between those tools. So it can really go, I'm going to show you an example of Dataverse MCP. You can ask it to create records, for instance, inside of Dataverse. And that is something that's really cool. You can also do that with a connector. But the cool part about an MCP server is that it can go back and forth between all the tools, because they have a tool for creating records. They have a tool for describing the tables. And that's really cool, because when you create a new record and you don't have the required fields yet, or the optional fields, it can use the describe table tool to describe what's in that table. And that way it can either ask you for the required fields, or when you already included that in your first prompt, it will automatically enter that into your tool call, for instance. So let's go a little bit further into the architecture. This is something that you will probably forget, because for Microsoft Copilot Studio, it's pretty easy. Copilot Studio is both the host and the client for MCP. And under that, you can have an MCP server. So you can add an MCP server to Copilot Studio agents. And those can contain a bunch of tools. This is an architecture that's pretty simple because it's Copilot Studio. But for other things, like for instance, Visual Studio Code, if you use that with GitHub Copilot, and I'm going to show that a little bit later as well, that is where you can have VS Code, Visual Studio Code as the host, and the client will be GitHub Copilot. But the more important part is the MCP server part. And there are already a whole lot of different MCP servers around. You can add, for instance, the GitHub MCP server, the Azure MCP server, the Dataverse MCP server. There are tons already available, and they all contain a whole bunch of tools. For instance, we have with Agent Academy, we have a lot of our infrastructure on GitHub. So we get a lot of GitHub issues where people say they completed a course. And for us, it's really, really nice to be able to go through all those issues. And we don't want to go through that through the browser, for instance, and click one by one through all those issues. And that's where the MCP server comes in for GitHub. We can just ask about if there's feedback in those issues. We can ask about all the different issues, how many feedback items we have, and what are the common themes, etc. And that really helps us to make it easy to get all the feedback. So yeah, we have a lot of MCP servers. And what's also really cool about MCP is that it got a really, really big adoption. I think this is already a little bit dated, but as you can see, there are a whole bunch of things here. A lot of things like LangGraph, agent protocol, etc. And if you see the MCP part has been going up like crazy. So a lot of people have been adopting MCP, and yeah, that's really cool to see. One thing that you really need to be aware of is the different server types that you have in MCP. The first time I started working with MCP, it was a bit annoying because I found a site where there were a lot of MCP servers already on that site. I think it was 1,000 different MCP servers. And I was like, oh, this is fun. I can now get those 1,000 MCP servers and just add them to Copilot Studio and try it out. And then I found out there were multiple server types. we had the STDIO server type, and that is based for local servers. So it is a thing that runs on your machine. It works really, really good when you are developing locally. But when you are working with Copilot Studio, you're working in the cloud. You have to then use a streamable HTTP server, and that's a different type. So when I looked at that website with all those 1,000 MCP servers, I was filtering on streamable HTTP, and there were only 2 out of 1,000 servers that were streamable HTTP. And back in the day, streamable HTTP was very new. Now it's a lot more MCP servers have that. But just be aware that when you are working with MCP inside of Copilot Studio, that the streamable HTTP is the way to go. So you need to figure out which servers are streamable HTTP if you want to add those to Copilot Studio. It's also really easy in Copilot Studio because when you add a tool and you click on Model Context Protocol, you will already see a whole bunch of MCP servers that are available out of the box. So you don't have to worry about that with the server types, but there might be a server, MCP server that you want to use that is not out of the box available in Copilot Studio, and that's where you need to be aware of those server types. And a lot of people have also been asking, if MCP is now a big thing, do we still need connectors? And when do we use what? And that's a question that we got from a lot of people. And to me, it's kind of a story. We have just another tool in the toolbox. So it's not about versus. It's more about and connectors. You can use Model Context Protocol and you can use connectors. Even when you add an MCP server inside of Copilot Studio, it will automatically create a connector behind the scenes. You won't really notice it, but MCP is also implemented through connectors in the Power Platform. And what basically happens when you create an MCP server inside of Copilot Studio, you get the wizard that you see on the right. And it will add the MCP server as a connector. And there will be one connector action in there, and that's basically the MCP server. For some of the connectors that are already out there, they also created an MCP server on top of a connector. So there are more connector actions in there. But why have we done that? Why did we start with Model Context Protocol in connectors? And that's because we already have a whole ecosystem of connectors. We have a lot of benefits already with connectors, like data loss prevention. That is something that we have had around already for Model Context, for connectors for a long time. And now with Model Context Protocol, you now have the option to do that as well. We also have multiple authentication methods. It was until, I think, June, when they only started with authentication inside of Model Context Protocol. Before that, there was no authentication. So when you have an MCP server with confidential data from your company, you couldn't do that because it was all open out in the open, and there was no authentication. So that's why we also chose for connectors, because we already had that possibility in there. There's also other things like virtual network support. If you want to have everything within your own virtual network, you can do that. And the certification for ISVs. And that's a really important one, because when you open Copilot Studio and you add a tool and you click on Model Context Protocol, you want to have a bunch of servers already there. And the certification for ISVs was also part of the connector program already, and that's now also for MCP servers there. In the beginning, you had to create your own connector, and now we have that all covered with the wizard that you see on the right. So you can just enter a name, a description, and a URL. You can choose to add authentication, and then you can click create. There are some differences though, when you look at MCP servers and connectors. MCP servers, they only work in Copilot Studio for now. There is a preview going on currently for Power Automate as well, where you can use MCP servers. But the connectors have the main advantage that you can use it in a lot of different tools. So you can use it in Copilot Studio, Power Apps, Power Automate, and Logic Apps. So when you build a connector, you can use it everywhere. When you build an MCP server, it only works in Copilot Studio and soon also Power Automate. The good part about it, as I said before, you only have to add the MCP server once. So you only have to add that as one tool to your agent, and then you get all the tools that are part of that MCP server. When you use a connector, you need to add all the different connector actions below it, and that takes a lot of time, of course. You don't have to do that much configuration work when you have an MCP server. When you are using connectors, you have to add them and then also describe all the connector actions, give them a description, give the parameters extra descriptions, etc. So that is something that is usually covered with the MCP server itself. What's also really cool is that when you update an MCP server and you add tools to it, it automatically gets updated without you having to change the agent. So it will just have the extra action in there. And that's really powerful because then you don't have to update configurations, etc. Sometimes you don't want that. That is also a thing that you can enforce. So within the MCP server, you now have in Copilot Studio a toggle where you can say, I only want these MCP server tools in this agent. So you can select a couple of them. And then whenever there's a new tool, you need to manually add that as well. So you have the options to do that as well. Difference between MCP servers and connectors is on data loss prevention as well, because for MCP servers currently, the only option is to enable or disable on server level. And with connectors, you can do that on action level. So you have a little bit more control over what you can enable or disable on a administrator level. So that was that. The next step is the MCP examples. I have a bunch of examples with me. I want to demo as much as possible. So I have been talking for already 10 minutes or so. I think it's good to show a bunch of examples. So when you are in Copilot Studio, you can add tools in your agents. And when you select the Model Context Protocol filter, so you have here all connector, prompt, flow, REST API, and Model Context Protocol. When you select Model Context Protocol, you will see only the Model Context Protocol servers. And here you can see already a whole bunch of MCP servers are available. And in the beginning, there were only a couple of them. But I think we are now at 55 or something. We have a lot of different MCP servers already available in Copilot Studio out of the box. So let me just go to the environment that I have and show you a little bit about this. So the thing I want to do now is I want to show a Dataverse agent where I use the MCP server for Dataverse. I already created an agent here. And let me zoom in a little bit, make it a little bit more readable for everyone. So I already have an agent here. I went to Tools, and I already added the Dataverse MCP server, but I'm gonna disable this and create it again. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit the Add a Tool button in the Tools menu, and then we can see here how we can add tools. There are a couple of things here. You can create new. So when I click here on Model Context Protocol, it will give me the option to add a new MCP server to this agent. Currently, I'm not going to do that because I'm going to use the Dataverse MCP server, and that MCP server is available already out of the box. So I can hit the filter here and click on Model Context Protocol. And there I can scroll down and I can see that I have a Dataverse MCP server, I have a DocuSign one, I have a whole bunch here. It's a little bit confusing because for Dataverse, we started a long time ago and we created the first MCP server, and that was not really the right direction for MCP servers. So we deprecated that one. And we have now new MCP servers, and those are listed a little bit lower. So you have the Microsoft Dataverse MCP server, and you have another one, and it's a little bit of a long title, so it's a bit hidden here. But the Microsoft Dataverse MCP server on the right side, you can see it in the tooltip above it, the white box with the text there. It says Model Context Protocol Server provides remote MCP server access to Dataverse with preview tools, and that's a very, very important text. If you go to the left, you can see it provides remote MCP access to Dataverse. So the right one is the preview tools, and the left one is the original one, or the good one. So when I select it, I'm going to select the normal one. I already have a connection available, but normally if you want to add one, you can click on Create New Connection, and then you can select Add and Configure. And when you click Add and Configure, this is the moment where you really add the MCP server to the agent. And now I end up on the MCP server details page. I can scroll down and I can see all the tools that I have here. And this is what I was already talking about earlier. You have, for instance, a tool called Create Record. This can create a record inside of the Dataverse environment. You can update records, you can delete records, you can fetch records, you can create tables, delete tables, update tables. There's a whole bunch of possibilities here. And what I also said before was you are able to control which tools you want in this agent. So in this case, I have set it to allow all. And that means whenever they update the Dataverse MCP server with new tools, they will automatically add them in this list, and they will already be added automatically. So there is no way currently, as I said it right now, there's no way to disable the ones. But if you click here on this button, you have the possibility to limit which ones you want to use. So when you use this toggle and now new ones come in, you need to enable them by hand. So it's manually enabled. And when you have that turned on, it will automatically be added when you have new tools. So here I can say, for instance, I don't want people to delete tables with the MCP server. I also don't want them to delete records, for instance, and then I can save it. And now my agent knows, oh, I can't use those tools that are in here. But what I can do now is I can actually start talking to my Dataverse agent. So what I can do now is I can create 2 account records with Microsoft demo company names. So what this can do, it can now start to create the records inside of the Dataverse environment that I'm in. I'm going to click allow because I need to connect or allow the connection to be used. And what it's doing now, it's going to initialize the server first. And then you can see on the left side also that it's creating records. So I can see here exactly what it did. So I can see it's using the account table and it added Microsoft Corporation here. And the second one is, again, the account table, and it says Contoso Ltd. When I go to Power Apps and I go to the table, I can show you also that the ones are in here. Oh, I probably didn't leave one before I tested this, but there are the accounts in here. What I can do now also is I can click on contact, and this one is empty right now. What I can do is I can go back to the tools here and say, can you also create 2 contact for each account? And then it should know, because it created those records already. It should know how to create that, and it's already going through a bunch of tools on the left. So what it did, it created a couple of contacts for each account. So it added John Doe and Jane Smith for Microsoft, and Alice Johnson and Bob Williams for Contoso. And when you look at the left, this is basically where we left off. So we had to create record. This is the Contoso LTD record that we created. After the second prompt I did, it's listing the tables. And that's what it's doing to make sure that it knows the name of the contacts table. So it found that in there. Then it did the describe table, also for the account, because it needed to know how to link the records to that account. It's reading the companies here, and then it's adding the contacts here. So it's showing contact, first name John, last name Doe. It's using the parent customer ID, and it's using the record ID that it used for the earlier accounts that were created. So when I go now to this page and I refresh, and there we go. You can see already that it had the 4 records in total, and 2 each that have a contact, and it linked already to the company as well. So it's using that as well. And how did I actually do this? Because I did a little bit of trickery before. I just created the Dataverse MCP server as a tool here in this agent, but I also cheated a little bit because I did something before you even saw that, and that's this part. I have the instructions here, and the instructions, these instructions are also listed on the documentation page of the Dataverse MCP. So when you go to the documentation page, we have a couple of documentation pages. We have the one that highlights how to connect to the Dataverse MCP, but we also have the configure one. And when you go to that page, you have a couple of things that are in this article. And one of them is write effective instructions for a Dataverse server agent. And when you scroll down a little bit, there are some sample agent instructions that you can just copy and paste. So that's what I did. I just copied this and added that to the instructions. And this tells you a little bit about when to use which tools, basically. So there are a lot of tools in that MCP server, but for the agent to actually understand everything, you might have to add instructions in there. And in this case, that's the case. We added the instructions here, and it's giving you all the instructions. And that's why the agent knows what to use when, basically. So if we go back again to the testing, the reason that it went to list tables and describe table and read query, etc., that was because of the instructions that we have here. So it said it needed to call the list tables before those kinds of things, and then call the describe table. That is something it used because of the instructions that we have here. So that's how you do that. Another thing that I did before I started using this in the agent is I enabled the Dataverse MCP server inside of Power Platform Admin Center. So when you are in your environment, by default, it will use the standard or the GA version of Dataverse MCP. But when I hit on settings and I go to product features, I can actually show you that there is more in here. You can actually allow the GA version of the MCP server. This is now by default on, I believe. And the preview version is by default off. So you have an option here to allow it or just disallow it, for instance. So this way, if I would save this, I couldn't use the preview version of the Dataverse MCP server. So that's an option that you have. Another thing that's really important is here, you can set the MCP clients that you can use to use the Dataverse MCP server. When I click here on advanced settings, it should open the environment. Oh, sign you out. Not the, uh-oh. We just show it in the description. That's easier. So we have the option here. So the advanced settings, that's the first part. So you can click on that, and then you will go to Power Apps, and you will see this kind of experience. And there you can say, I want to, for instance, allow the Microsoft Copilot Studio application to use it, or the GitHub Copilot. And by default, it's always set for Copilot Studio to yes with enabled. And for GitHub Copilot, you have to manually enable that yourself. And you can also do that for other AI tools that you want. So if you want to use Claude Code, for instance, or Claude, you can enable that as well. That's just another setting here that you can enable. So there's lots of possibilities there as well. Let me go back to my slides. Another thing that we can use as well is we can use MCP outside of Copilot Studio. And a lot of people don't really think about that because we are all Power Platform people. We want to use Copilot Studio, but sometimes there are certain things that you can do locally on your machine, for instance. So when you have administrators, they need to administer the Power Platform. They need to look at tenant settings. They need to look at environment settings. They need to maybe administer users, give them access. There's a whole bunch of things that you want to manage as an administrator. In this example, you can use Model Context Protocol in GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio Code, and you can connect to the Power Platform. So in this case, we are turning it around a little bit, because in the earlier example, so this is where we are using the Power Platform to connect to MCP servers. In this example, I'm going to use an outside tool, so GitHub Copilot and Visual Studio Code, to connect to the Power Platform. So it's a little bit of an other way to think about it. And what I'm going to do in this example is I'm going to show a couple of things where you can, as an admin, you can list all the tenant settings, and you can get a report on that, on what you are doing well, what you should improve, when you should improve that, etc. So let's switch back to the demo, and let me go to my Visual Studio Code, because I have that already available. And what I've done here is in Visual Studio Code, I already configured an MCP server, and that's the Power Platform CLI MCP server. The Power Platform CLI is a tool where you can use commands to act on the Power Platform. So you can ask to add people to an environment if you want to. You can assign them roles. You can back up your environment. You could create new environments. There's a whole bunch of actions already available. And I added the MCP server for that, also to Visual Studio Code. And what that actually does is the MCP server makes it possible for us to just describe something, and we don't have to remember all the CLI commands, because those are really hard to remember. And now you can just talk to it. So what's really cool about that is that you can just start asking things to that. So let me see. Ask a question, say something like, what authentication profile do I have? And this is one of the things that you can do with the Power Platform CLI. You can ask for authentication profiles. You can add multiple profiles. And in this case, it says I have only one authentication profile, and we have 13 environments in that environment, but I am connected to an environment with my own name, Daniel Laskewitz, and that's it. So this is one of those things. And when you click on this, it's kind of funny, because you can look at the output of the Power Platform CLI behind the scenes. So this is what you would normally see if you would use the Power Platform CLI. it shows a whole bunch of things in there. So that's what it will show you. Now I want to ask a question. Can I get tenant settings? So that's another tool that you can use in the Power Platform CLI, and that's the admin list tenant settings. And what it can do here, it can create a whole bunch of, or it can output a whole bunch of settings that we have in the Power Platform. So what admin, for instance, can do is they can disable portals creation by non-admin users, for instance, so that only people who are admins can use the Power Pages sites, etc. There are tons of settings here that you could do. But what I want to do here, and I'm going to copy and paste quickly text, because I want to, oh, pardon me. There. Let me switch back. There we go. I want to copy and paste a text here. And I'm going to analyze my current Power Platform tenant settings and get a governance improvement plan. I use a lot of things here. I ask for it to use the current tenant configuration and check against Microsoft recommended best practices. I want to prioritize lists. I want to see priority levels, etc. I want to even include emojis and color formatting to make it better readable, etc. And this is basically a long prompt that I'm using. And when I'm hitting send, it will go through the tenant settings, and it will look at all the different settings that I have now. And then it will come back with a whole plan. So here it is. It's already starting to write out the whole plan. And to give you a bit of an idea, back in the day when I didn't work for Microsoft, I worked as a consultant, and we had an offering to our customers that we would talk for we would be there for a week, and then we would look at all the settings that they had, and we would enforce all the best practices that we had at that customer. And that took about 5 days to write the report, etc. And when MCP came in, the Power Platform CLI MCP came in, I was looking at this. I was like, oh, this is going to save me so much time. Because normally when you would do this in 5 days, that would take a lot of time for the customer as well. And now I can just use this. And it's not perfect, because sometimes there is thing that's in the large language model that's behind this. And it might not have the right data behind it, because the large language models are usually a little bit behind, because it's trained on data, and the data is always a couple months old. And that means that when you have a new tenant setting that's new and that's not included yet in those training data, it will not show up here. And that's something that you can always also avoid, because you can also provide your whole tenant settings that you want to have as best practices. And then if you use the agents here to cross-check around that, it can kind of configure, or it can show the differences between the desired state that you have as settings or the current state. But as we go down here in the plan, you can see we're doing well at certain areas. There are a bunch of things in our demo tenant that we should improve according to the LLM, and that's completely correct. For instance, trial environments here, we have this setting set to false. Disable trial environment creation by non-admin users. We have set that to false. And it says the risk is high for this setting because we don't want everybody to create trial environments, because that could be an uncontrolled situation. So there are tons of things that we can see here, like disable connection sharing with everyone. We don't want to have the connection sharing with the whole organization. So that's what we have here as well. And there are tons of other options. And it's really cool to see these kinds of findings, because it can give you a really, really good view of what you have in your environment without actually doing a lot of effort, because this was something that I can do in a couple of minutes and then you're done. And here it shows everything around business impact, even the current state and the recommended state. It does a whole bunch of things here. It even gives you the days that you should do this. So it says this is immediate, it's critical, so you need to do that now. This is high within 30 days, so you can wait a little bit with that. And then it goes on with in a couple of months, and these are not important at all. Basically, it can be in a year maybe or something. Then it gives me the whole roadmap for it with how I should go about this. It gives the whole plan here, also even the communication plan in there, etc. I think this is a really cool example of how you can use the MCP servers. Let me now switch back again here, because I have showed you the MCP servers inside of Copilot Studio that were out of the box available. So when we go here to tools and I click on add a tool, what you can see now here is that we have the model context protocol part, and we have added the Dataverse MCP server. But what I want to show you as well is that we can have our own MCP server. So we can create our own MCP server, host that on Azure, and then we can add that to our environment as well. And that's something I already did. I created in Azure a jokes MCP server. It includes jokes from Chuck Norris and dad jokes. And I already created that. I have a URL here, which I can use for that. And when I open it up, so let me open it up, it gives me an error. The endpoint is always /MCP, so I'm going to add that. And what you can see here is another error, and this is because I'm opening it in the browser. So it does a get method, and that's why it says method not allowed. But I can see that it is running because it gives me this error message. So I know that this URL is the right URL for my jokes MCP server, but I'm going to add it. So I'm going to get you through the whole experience of when you want to add an existing MCP server to your agent, but it is not in the out-of-the-box MCP servers. I'm going to add a tool here. And then we went to the bottom in the beginning to get MCP servers that are already out of the box available. But in this case, we are going to create a new one. So I'm going to click on Model Context Protocol. And this gives me the wizard that I showed you earlier as well. And what I can do now here is I can add a server name here. I can add a description. And this is jokes MCP 0 to hero. It's adding this the description even, and I can add the URL here. And this is basically the same URL as I showed you at the top. So that's all already added here. If I want, I can add authentication. In this case, we have a jokes MCP server that doesn't have authentication, so I'm going to leave it to none. But you have a couple of possibilities here. And then I can hit create. And what it's doing now, it's behind the scenes creating a connector on top of that MCP server, and it will add it to the agent. And this usually takes a couple of seconds, and then I will have a button to add it to the agent and to connect as well. I need to connect. It's an MCP server without authentication, but I still need a connection. So I'm going to hit create here. And now it's there, and I can click on add and configure. So when I now add this, I have the possibility to see the MCP server details. If it's done, take a little while. There we go. The tool was added to the agent, so we now have the tool here. And when you look at the tools, you can see that we have a bunch of tools here. I have a get Chuck joke. That's a get a random Chuck Norris joke. I have a get Chuck joke by category tool that gets a Chuck Norris joke by category. I can get the Chuck Norris categories as well for the jokes, because I want to know which categories there are so that I can filter that. And I have a get that joke tool. So let me create a new test session, and let me ask for can I get the joke Norris categories? And it will prompt me now to create a connection. And we already did that, but we are using now the test pane, and we need to connect the connection to the test pane. So I'm going to hit Open Connection Manager. And I'm going to connect that one. It will take a little while before it finds the connection that we just created, and then I can click Submit. And when I hit retry now, it should go and initialize that MCP server. And it should start running it. Sometimes that it doesn't really work well after the creation of the connection. So I think that's the case now. Let me try it again. To create a connection and add that to the MCP server, you only have to do that once. So as you can see now, it won't prompt me again for creating that connection. And here it already says, these are the available Chuck Norris categories. We have a whole bunch of them. Now I can say, can I get a Chuck Norris joke from the dev category? And that should then use a different tool. And here we see it, get Chuck joke by category. And it used the dev category in there. So it's also found out where to put that in the category. So it gives you the Chuck Norris joke in there as well. And this is how easy it is to also get a MCP server that's not out of the box available, but it's your custom MCP server. You can also see how easy that is to add that to your agents. It's pretty easy because you just have to enter a URL, and if you have to configure the authentication, it's just a couple steps more. It's not that hard to do that. Okay, let me go back to the slides. Okay. One thing I want to highlight as well is the Agent Academy that we have. I have the link here, aka.ms/agent-academy. If you go there, you can go to our courses. We have a whole bunch of courses. We have Recruit, Operative. Those are all multi-mission courses where you can get through, and you can get a nice badge to show that you finished it. We recently also added special ops missions where you can have like a little bit smaller missions that you can do, and you can get badges for that as well. So let me also quickly show that. Have it open here. So when you go to Agent Academy, we have the special ops missions here. And you might recognize some things because when I click on the Microsoft Copilot CEO loves MCP, this is the server that I just showed you, where you are using the jokes MCP server. So if I scroll down, it shows you the whole experience on how to create that with those jokes, and that you can ask for the different jokes there as well. The other one is the Power Platform CLI MCP server, and that's the one where you can get advice for the tenant settings. That's also available here, and you basically have the whole step-by-step guide on how to go through that. And of course, for both of them, you will be able to claim the completion badge, and then you get a badge that you can show off also on LinkedIn, etc. Same goes for the jokes MCP one. And of course, we have the Recruit and Operative one, and in the future we will also have Commander. So make sure to check out this site. I am now done with the demo, so I would love to hear if there are some questions. because I have some time left for that. And I'm sure there are some.
Oops, there was one question around installing the Power Platform CLI MCP.
Yes.
I think we already got the answer in the chat
Yeah.
itself.
I can quickly show you. There are multiple ways of doing that. So I have that open here. So you can start the MCP server pretty easily. You can use this command, which is really easy to do. You can also use this one, by the way, but this one is more interesting because you don't have to install the Power Platform CLI. It will just run it. And this is really important because some of the people might have a company device, and sometimes it's really locked down. So then you can't use or you can't install certain things on your machine. This command makes it possible to run it without even installing it. So when you use that and you go to Visual Studio Code, you can open the command pane. That's, I think, Control-Shift-P. And then you can go to MCP add server. So you can just search for MCP. You will see the add server part. Then you have to select the stdio because this is a locally running MCP server. So that's why I also was talking about the different server types. This is a local running, so you can't also add this to Copilot Studio because it's a local running MCP server. So that's why you can only run it inside of your local VS Code. And when you do that and you select, oh, wrong one, sorry. Let me go back to one. So when you paste that and you hit enter, you can add that. So I can say Power Platform CLI MCP 020. I hit enter. You can even make it available globally or in my workspace if you want to limit where you want to show that. And then it will add it to my configuration here. And now you can see we have the original one that I already added before, and you can see also that I have the 020 one, and it automatically adds it to your VS Code. So it's pretty easy to do that.
Nice.
You need to, of course, make sure that you are authenticated. That's also a good one, because when it runs it locally, you don't automatically get all the authentication profile running. So you might need to create that before you can get the output, because you need to, of course, still authenticate to that. So that's an important step as well. But yeah, it's all in the docs. You can go for Power Platform CLI MCP, and you will find the docs here. I can share those later as well. I'm going to share the slides with you, Victor, and then you can probably share them with the rest. I will make sure to have a resource slide in there with a couple of links to all the stuff that I showed.
We charge per download, actually, though.
Okay. But yeah, it's really funny to be working with all these MCP servers. It gives you a lot of power. And you also have to be aware that you kind of have to figure out how to use everything, because you can also do really, really destructive things. Because what I just showed you was I asked something about tenant settings, like get all the tenant settings for me and give me advice about it. But I could also say, apply all these settings to the tenant settings right now. And then it will update the tenant settings for you. And that's a little bit more scary to me. So you can do that, but make sure that you are aware that it could go wrong. So always try this in a safe environment, like your own developer tenant or something. Don't do this on a company tenant straight away. Make sure that you do that in a little bit more controlled environment. But also there are some things like in the beginning when I showed it in VS Code, I had to click allow at some point. You can make sure that it asks for clicking allow every single time. So it doesn't go through it immediately. You can always control if they are putting in the right things in the settings, etc. So you have a little bit more control that way, but it's still a little bit scary to me to go through that.
We have one question from Ramya. Who
Yes.
should be allowed to use MCP server? This one is sketchy though, because you may want to enable access to specific actions from an MCP server in an agent.
Yeah.
I think in the future we'll see DLPs geared towards MCP servers and
Tools.
MCP
Yeah.
actions
Yeah.
as well, or tools. And
Correct.
so it's a tough one to give just a single answer, Ramya.
Yeah. I think there's a little bit, a couple of things to unpack, because when you're talking about MCP servers, there's one scenario where you are, as a maker, adding those to your agents. That's one scenario. The other scenario is when somebody is using the agent that has been created by a maker before. And yeah, if you look at the Dataverse scenario that I just used, creating records and updating records, that is something that we already can do from a Power App, probably. Like if we have a model-driven app or something, we can do that. So why not have an agent that can do that as well? But there were some actions in there that you probably don't want to use AI for, like deleting tables, those kinds of things. You might not want people to do that. It's still the case that you have a security role in that environment. And the Dataverse MCP is, of course, a little bit weird here because it's all on the same platform. But if you have a security role where you are not allowed to delete tables or to create tables, you will get an error when you have those tools in your MCP server in the agent. It's not like all of a sudden you can delete tables while you didn't have that permission in your security role. So it doesn't give you extra privileges or something like that. Mm-hmm. But I think sysadmins only. I think it depends, and that's really a consultant question, a consultant answer. But yeah, it really depends. I think using MCP servers can also be an end user thing, definitely. But it depends on the scenario. I wouldn't want end users to go about tenant settings, what I just talked about. They can't even access them because they don't have the privileges for it. It all depends on the MCP server, who you want to get access and who you don't want to get access. Does that make sense?
It makes sense to me. I was just waiting for confirmation from Ramya, but I think so. Yeah. I saw thumbs up.
Okay, I see
amazing.
Thumbs up. Yeah. Okay.
I mean, we are top of the hour. This was an amazing lesson. The only comment I was gonna make is this though. On the rise of Power Platform, we had a catchy phrase that was created by the community and attributed to the Power Platform, even for official materials later on, which was low code, more power. Mm-hmm. And at times it feels like we are going back to, more code, yet a lot more power, right? So we saw MCP here from the maker perspective, but also on the developer perspective when Daniel demoed the use of MCPs in VS Code. There is no restriction on the amount of MCPs that you load in a session. So I would say experiment the MCPs you are available for the tools you use day to day. I did one example in the first lesson where I connected through MCP to Azure DevOps, and I asked DevOps what are my tasks for the day, or the open tasks, and I asked it to and then I loaded another MCP from Microsoft Learn, and then I said, hey, I am coding as a Power Pages developer. Here are the tasks that I have to complete today. Start with a plan. Tell me what I should look into first. And then it built a plan for me. And then I asked it to run the code. But suppose that in that mix, I needed to consult for data that existed in the Dataverse, actual data, right? It was a pain to be able to pause my session and then go to Dataverse, look at data. Now we can do it using the Dataverse MCP. Not only that, I can look at metadata, and then if the tasks that I need to complete rely on metadata that exists on a particular instance, then MCP can go fetch that information for me and build the code that I want. And then now on top of it, one of the things that I wasn't very fond of VS Code using the Dataverse MCP, especially for data access, was the way that the data was presented. You had to really indicate what columns and the format that you want to see data. But now with MCP apps, that gap is removed, right?
Yeah.
So from my dev station as a coder, I have all the tools that I need that in the past would force me to go to yet another screen or browser tab to get the answers that I need. So I believe more code, exponentially more power. So I'm gonna push for that one. All
Okay,
right.
great, man.
Anyhow, sorry for the long speech, but I
No
get super
worries.
excited with these things.
Same here. I have all the time, so it's all good.
Awesome, awesome. Friends, thank you so much for joining today. Daniel, my friend, thank you so very much for your time. We'll see the rest of the team next week, and Daniel, I'll see you in about 15 days in Seattle.
Yes, see you there. Thanks for
Take
inviting me.
care, bro.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.